Chapter 1. Farty Marty, a heartwarming tale of farts and friendship. Night had settled in on the farm. The stars in the sky were twinkling, and the sound of crickets and bullfrogs could be heard for miles. The air was clean and crisp. That is, clean and crisp outside the barn. Inside the barn, where the animals were just nestling into their hay piles for a well-earned night of sleep, the air was different. Very, very different.
"Man,"
said a sheep named Franklin from the east side of the barn.
"What's that funky smell?"
The other animals perked up their heads and tried to identify exactly what that funky smell was. Winnie, a pig, said it could have been the smell of emissions from a gas-guzzling SUV. Dory, a goat, argued that it wasn't an SUV, but rather a tractor. "You know how that thing backfires when Farmer Dave turns it off. Stinks to high heaven, don't it?" She looked around the barn for support from the others. When she didn't get any, she walked out of the barn, muttering under her breath. Franklin stuck his sniffer in the air and took a great big grab of it. Both nostrils stretched to capacity. He leaned his head back and started chewing with nothing in his mouth. He kept sniffing and chewing and eventually worked his way over to a stall in the middle of the barn. It belonged to a cow named Marty. Marty was not a large cow, but he was not a small cow either. He was a medium cow, but his farts, they were tremendous. They were not the farts of your typical run-of-the-mill mid-range cow. They were the farts of a gigantic cow. They had the power to clear a barn full of filthy farm animals, and Marty's butt was in full force tonight.
"I hope you're happy with yourself,"
Franklin said, looking down at Marty, trying not to choke as he spoke. Marty put his head down in shame. This wasn't the first time something like this had happened, and it was beginning to happen more and more. At first it would happen once, maybe twice a month, but lately it'd been once or twice a week, and this was his second night in a row. Franklin started to walk back toward the other animals when Marty let loose again. The first fart had been an SPD, silent but deadly, that had floated and lingered in the air before enveloping the other farm animals in a festering cloud of funk. The second fart, however, was loud and unproud. It was thrust past Marty's tail with such force that his tail ended up at rest on his back. Marty looked up to see what Franklin's reaction would be. All Franklin could do was shake his head and walk away. Marty put his head back down and began to cry. He had to get this under control, but how? The sun came up and the rooster crowed. It had not been a good night. It had been a night of broken sleep and broken wind. The animals were slow to get going, casting nasty glances in the direction of Marty's stall. Marty was laying low. Unfortunately, his farts weren't. He didn't think it was possible, but they actually sounded and smelled like they were getting worse. They were louder and smellier than before. Finally, he stood up and walked past the others and out of the barn. Every step he took produced gas. The other animals turned away and covered their snouts, beaks, and bills. One of the animals quipped, "Hey, Marty, you just gave Jim Bob freckles." The other animals fell over in laughter. Marty just put his head down and continued farting his way out of the barn. He stepped out into the grazing field, and the big ball of gas in the sky forced a big ball of gas from Marty's backside. Marty was feeling as low as he could. Earlier the night before, the gas attack had brought him some relief. He had been feeling some rumblings in his tummy, and forcing some air out of his derriere had calmed the storm down a bit. At first. But as the night dragged on and his belly kept right on going and his butt kept right on blowing, he started to feel annoyed and self-conscious. He couldn't get any sleep, and he knew he had a busy day of eating grass and standing in a field ahead of him. If he didn't get some sleep, he'd be forced to find a spot under the tree by the side of the road and lie down in the middle of the day. And then the people in the cars would look at him and point and think that he was one of those lazy cows. They might even call him beef jerky, the worst slight for any cow. And for most of the cows sitting under those shade-giving trees, they'd be right.
to keep listening to this audiobook. I've left you a link in the description so you can do it, at no cost thanks to Audible's 30-day free trial.